The relationship between America and the Gulf Arab states has always been complex. It's a mix of alliances, shared interests, and even wars, like what happened in Iraq. But beyond alliances, there's also a story of exploitation and long-term political impacts. The relationship between America and the Gulf didn't start yesterday. It goes back decades, specifically to the mid-20th century, when America began to realize the importance of Gulf oil for its economy and global power. In the 1940s and 1950s, the United States was searching for reliable energy sources to fuel its industrial and military growth. This is where Gulf oil became crucial. After discovering massive reserves in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and other countries, America began building strategic alliances with these nations. One of the most prominent alliances was with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1945, when the Quincy Agreement was signed between U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and King Abdulaziz Al Saud. This agreement laid the foundation for a long-term relationship, Saudi oil in exchange for American protection. The United States didn't just exploit the Gulf states for their oil, it also leveraged them for other strategic roles. Especially during the Cold War, when the Gulf region became a battleground between the United States and the Soviet Union. America saw the Gulf states as natural allies against the spread of communism, particularly after the 1979 revolution in Iran, which ended the rule of the pro-American Shah and established a regime hostile to the West. At that point, the Gulf states became key allies in countering Iranian influence. But with Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990, the dynamics between America and the Gulf changed. America began to expand its influence in the Gulf region. Initially, it led an international coalition to liberate Kuwait from the Iraqi invasion, which strengthened its military presence in the region. The second turning point came in 2003 with the U.S. invasion of Iraq. This time, America wasn't an ally to the Gulf states. It was an adversary exploiting their resources. Of course, we all remember how America claimed that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, which later turned out to be false. This claim led to the fall of Saddam Hussein's regime and opened the door to widespread chaos in the region. From that point on, America began playing the role of the world's police officer, intervening in everything related to the Gulf. All the developments and stages that the United States went through to exploit and control the Gulf states took a new turn with the presidency of Donald Trump. In 2017, the relationship between America and the Gulf entered a new phase. Trump, as a businessman, viewed the Gulf through a purely commercial lens. On his first official visit as president, he headed to Saudi Arabia to seal massive deals worth $400 billion. The deals included weapons, economic agreements, and extensive investment cooperation between the two countries. Trump described the deal as the largest deal in American history, but the only thing that was clear was that it was an attempt to drain the Gulf's wealth for the benefit of the American economy, with little to no gain for the Gulf states. After that, Trump began portraying himself as the savior of the Gulf states, claiming they needed him more than he needed them. His statements about the Gulf were always controversial. On more than one occasion, he threatened to cut off military support to the Gulf states if they didn't pay for protection, similar to what happened recently with Egypt and Jordan, where he explicitly threatened to halt aid to both countries if they didn't agree to his plan to displace Palestinians from Gaza. The problem is that Trump always comes across as indifferent, whether through his statements or his so-called brilliant plans, to the point where, in one of his famous tweets, he said that Saudi Arabia wouldn't last 2 weeks without American support. During Trump's presidency, America continued to rely on Gulf oil, but of course, with even greater pressure to maximize American interests. In 2020, when oil prices collapsed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Trump asked Saudi Arabia to cut oil production to save the American shale oil industry. And indeed, under pressure, Saudi Arabia agreed to reduce production, showing the world how America uses its influence to serve its own interests, even at the expense of its allies. The issue between Trump and the Gulf states goes way back, even before he became President of the United States. In an old interview, he said he was tired of Gulf states living like kings, while America only got 25% in return for protection. He believed the Gulf states were stealing from America. And in 2016, during his election campaign, he vowed that he would make the Gulf states pay off the U.S. national debt, which was estimated at $19 trillion. He always claimed that without America, the Gulf states wouldn't even exist. And after the strained U.S.-Gulf relations during Biden's presidency, which signaled a shift in America's focus away from the Middle East and its oil, Trump, upon his return to the White House, rekindled cooperation with the Gulf states. He sealed multiple arms deals with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and finalized agreements for massive Saudi investments on American soil. But at the same time, he launched a new energy agenda under the slogan, "Drill, baby, drill," to boost American oil and gas production. Because Trump now believes that the United States has become the world's largest oil producer. If we look at the relationship between Trump and the Gulf states today, we'll find it's like a dance of interests. Trump sees America as number one and views the Gulf as nothing more than a cash machine ready to pay at any moment. Whether through massive arms deals or pressuring Saudi Arabia to cut oil production, Trump always took more than he gave. So the question is, will this relationship continue in the same way? Will the Gulf states keep relying on America? Or will they open doors to other players like China and Russia? Interests between America and the Gulf are always shifting, so what happened in the past doesn't necessarily predict the future, and that leaves us wondering, what's next?